Tight Little Island Revisited. On CBC Tuesday night, Sheila Shotton talks to some of the islanders who recall their experiences following the grounding of the whiskey ship Politician, one of the happiest shipwrecks in history, immortalized in Compton Mackenzie's book Whiskey Galore and in the movie Tight Little Island.
Now I'd like to sing the song of the Politician, that beautiful boat that was a godsend to the islands when whiskey was very, very difficult to get, until one of these rough nights, that boatload of the best whiskey I've ever tasted was just laid down on our doorstep. And this song was composed by Roddy Campbell. He was a sailor and a good bard. Han ik barte kyrga machos skake vi forvigen. Og vi æste traumnaga, så skytiga kortkin mi. Smarha mig du har trog, haglos mi afri.
The Hebrides are a long chain of water-laced islands off Scotland's west coast. They form a channel to the Atlantic and during World War II were a heavily traveled convoy route to America. At 3:05 a.m. on February 5, 1941, the SS Politician sailed, destination New Orleans in Jamaica. In little more than 4 hours, she struck a rock at Calvi Island, Eriskay Sound, and her captain and crew abandoned ship. The Politician wasn't the only vessel to go down in those treacherous waters. What made her unique was her cargo. 17,000 cases of prime Scotch whiskey, 204,000 bottles. I was there last November, and until that time thought the movie Tight Little Island, based on Sir Compton Mackenzie's book Whiskey Galore, was a figment of his very fertile imagination. It wasn't at all. I found all kinds of people to volunteer their side of the story. Everybody remembered it differently, but one thing all the islanders agreed on, it was their finest hour. Mr. Macmillan, were you here when the Politician struck the rocks?
Oh, yes, I was here all right during the time of the war. It was a very, very dull time. Whiskey was very scarce. And as you can all understand, it's all over the world. When whiskey goes short, everybody will be very sad.
Well, you want to know about the tides. There's a drift of the tide to the west, which mariners don't all know about. You see, in these ships, I should say all the ships were coming up the Mince then for safety, you see, safety from submarines. So it ran aground on a filthy night, and the crew abandoned it. See? And it was left there, and lay there for weeks, 6 weeks almost, with no night watchman or no watchman at all.
Maybe you've never heard of it before, but because that's a terrible place for wrecking boats. It's been said that there is some magnetism in the rocks up there that plays fun with their compasses.
Well, it seems an awfully strange sort of a cargo for war years, doesn't it?
Oh, no, they were exporting all the whiskey they could to the States to get money in order to pay for the arms that we were getting from America.
But then she must have been a bit off course, was she not?
She wasn't off course to begin with at all. It started the tail of the Bang, that's in the estuary of the Clyde. The convoy assembled there, and then they set out. She was on course all right until she got up here, and her skipper didn't know about the drift of the tide, and she just drifted onto the rocks.
How long did it take, Mr. Macmillan, for people to start boarding the Politician after she crashed on the rocks?
Well, just, I would say, about 3/4 of an hour. The survivors, or whatever you call it, were going down one side, and the islanders were going up the other side.
First of all, The kids went on board and they smashed everything they could. And then the next thing was that their parents thought this was good fun, and they went out to have a look in the hold. And they came upon this fund of whiskey and God knows what all.
But one day, on a very cold day, I was down on the Maher of Sociust, and in the distance I saw people digging up potatoes from a potato pit or clamp or whatever you like to call it. And then they lifted a man out of the potato pit onto the car. And I asked the neighbor, what's wrong with that man? And did he have a heart attack or so? No, he's drunk. I said, where did he get the drink? Did you not hear about that boat? That was the first time we ever heard about it, because it was kept very quiet all about her. But in any case, we went out up to investigate. And there she was lying there in Callaway. The biggest boat I've ever seen in my life. And the following night, myself and 3 or 4 other good boys, they're not here just now, they're away all over the world, went out to the politician. She was lying at an angle there, and a rope ladder was hanging down the side. And it was a terrible thing for us who never climbed a rope ladder in our lives to get up that, and it was covered with tar and the fuel oil from the tanks, the burst tanks of the boat. At one time the ladder would be round your neck, and the other time it would be twisting around, but in any case we got there. And what a show of whiskey on the twin decks. Cases stacked up there. We loaded the boat to the gunnels, and we got back, I don't know, but one thing you couldn't drink whiskey while you were on the boat with all the fumes and everything like that.
Apparently, when she went on this rock, it punctured the fuel tanks, you see, and every time the tide rose, it brought this dirty fuel oil up into the hold. And you see everything, and when it went away, everything was saturated with this black fuel oil. The result was rather annoying for the crofters when they wanted the whiskey, because they used to put down a rope, put a man in the hold, you see, and put down a rope, and they put a rope round a case and take it up. Black, of course, they couldn't see what it was until they opened it. Half bottles, we don't want half bottles, and they threw them in the scuppers. And when I went aboard, the scuppers were, at least 18 inches deep with half bottles. You wouldn't believe it. I never saw so much whiskey in my life, you know.
Well, now give me a little bit of an insight as to the people who live in this area. What kind of reaction was there when they found out what the cargo was?
Oh dear, oh dear. My introduction to it really was that I came here on holiday, went for a walk, met one of the locals, you know, and said, hello, how are you, Hamish? And he said, oh, it's nice to see you. And he produced a bottle of whiskey out of his, you know. All I could see was it was stenciled, the federal laws of the USA prohibit the resale of this article. Stenciled, not stenciled, but embossed in the bottle, you know. And then I realized it was something funny, and so I went back to the hotel and spoke to the hotel proprietor, and he said, oh yes, there's a whiskey ship aground.
Tell me, do you think the crew were drunk? Do you think this is one reason why she went on to the rock?
I think so. That was the first impression I got when I got aboard that boat. I just went round the top to explore.
Were there any signs of their having been drinking?
Oh, the signs, but sure. The crew's quarters there were littered with bottles of 3-star and 5-star rum, and empty boxes of cigars, cigarettes, and everything. I had, believe, I got, say, over 40 cases out of
And how long did that last you?
it. 2 months.
You drank 40 cases of
I
liquor in
didn't.
2 months?
I
You and your
didn't.
friends?
Well, I think as much as I could, but I had a lot of friends at that time, and you didn't mean anything to give them a drink. You give 3 or 4 bottles to take home with you. The stuff we get today is pure raw stuff. Compared with that, you could drink that all day and all night. You never have a hangover after it.
Mr. McNeil,
That
how many
was all.
cases did you get altogether?
One night we got 32 cases.
What did you do with it all?
I don't know myself, really.
Did it just sort of disappear?
Of course. Yeah, well, yes, we had a good time and giving it all to people who were not at the... Well, just giving it away.
Did you sell the whiskey at all?
No one ever sold them, not a bottle.
Did anybody ever sell any whiskey and make a profit on it?
No, I don't think so. No.
I'm told that merchants were selling it at half a crown a nip across the counter.
Half a crown per drink. Now, if I went to buy a bottle, how much would they have paid?
They a pound a bottle, I believe.
Was that reasonable for 1941?
Oh, yes, quite. Yes, well, not exactly when they got it free. You see, it wasn't very fair at all.
Were you not afraid of the customs and excise men?
Who would be afraid when it was full of that good whiskey?
How was the policeman on the island? How did he get along with everybody? He'd have to do his duty, would he not?
Oh, he was probably doing his duty as well as he could, but he couldn't be everywhere at the one time.
Well, I watched Angus John Campbell with his little motorboat coming into the loch, laden till the gunwale was 4 inches above the water, laden with cases of whiskey. And an exciseman living in Lochbysdale didn't see him or never thought about it.
But didn't he hear about it?
Oh, he didn't. We played bridge in the hotels. We played a lot of bridge there. And one night he used to come and watch us play bridge. And he said to the hotel proprietor, whose name was Finlay, by the way, he said, "Finlay, there's an awful lot of drunkenness nowadays. Everybody was rationed. Whiskey was rationed, and the hotel had a very small quota." And of course Finlay looked at me and dared me to laugh. I knew what was going on. He didn't know at all.
Well, now, how big was the population of Lochbysdale in those days?
Oh, probably 200. Wouldn't be that in those days.
Or you mean most of them, 199 of the people knew and only the
Oh, yes.
excise
It's
men?
not only Lochbysdale, you see, but the crofts spread from east to west across the island. Every crofter knew about this.
Well, now,
No.
wasn't there an awful lot of traffic from shore to ship?
Oh, terrible. You have no idea. It was all right as long as the locals were at it. You see, they were taking them home. They were going out every night and coming back laden with whiskey and having to hide it, you see. By the time they came back, of course, they were all drunk. You see, they were all well away, and they carried the whiskey up to their crofts and dug up a bog and buried the whiskey. And there's lots of it there today that they don't remember where they buried it.
Is it true that everybody hid bottles in the bogs, under mattresses of sick old ladies, down in the water, by the sands, buried it everywhere?
Oh, yes, that's quite true. I had them all over my craft. I used to dig out square holes in the ground, cast the soil away, and bend the turf back over them, and you'd never know it if you hadn't got markings, a fencing post or something like that, having cross bearings on them.
Did you mark some of yours so you always remembered where you'd put it?
Oh, I remember it all right, I think. I think there was some attraction in that good stuff itself would always pull you back to the place where you ate it. I never lost a bottle in my life.
Well, now, these people, did they get all the cargo off the ship?
Oh, dear, no, nothing like it. and they were at it, and then they came with fishing boats from Skye, and they came from the mainland of Scotland.
And still the excise man never caught on?
No, until this exciseman in Loch Blaisdell, I better not mention his name, he was walking up the road and saw an empty bottle, and it was a peculiar shape, you see. And he picked it up and looked at it, and there it was, staring him in the face. The federal laws of the USA prohibit the resale of this article. And then he realized there was something wrong. And of course he knew that the ship had gone aground 6 weeks prior to that, at least 6 weeks prior to that. And he phoned his head office, and they said, oh yes, this ship had left in convoy, but got lost somewhere, you know.
How long did it take for the customs and excise men to get here?
The local customs man was on the following day with Mr. McCall here from Loch Blaisdell.
Was he pretty unpopular with all the locals? Because he'd have to do his duty, would he not?
Oh, well, I would he wasn't popular with some of them, but I could never say that against Mr. McCall, because they could have pulled me in any time I went around. And that you can understand, all these officials are unpopular if they do their duty.
Well, now, why didn't they pull you in?
I couldn't tell you. I was lucky, one of these lucky ones.
I remember they got excisemen, and they had police in civilian clothes going around all the bogs where they suspected a crofter of having, helped himself, going around the bog with steel rods, into the peat to try and come on a case of whiskey. They found a few.
This is about a friend of mine who had been all his life at sea, namely Roddy Campbell. He was a very famous character, and he was caught coming off the politician with some of the whiskey. And of course he was taken to Lochmaddy. This is the sheriff court on the next island. And he was put in the witness box. And the sheriff asked him, were you Roddy Campbell from South Loch Blaisdell? Were you aboard this ship, the politician? And Roddy Campbell said, I was. When were you aboard the politician? I was aboard the politician in a place that probably you never heard of. I was aboard the politician in Vancouver Island 8 years ago. This knocked the case out of existence completely.
And your friend Angus John, I must tell you, this is awfully good. And an excellent speaker of English. Not only that, but he spoke Gaelic fluently, and he was one of the few people who could read and write Gaelic. Eventually, they got him there were 6 of them altogether, you see, and they were locked up in the police station. And caught them right-handed with cases of whiskey, And they were taken to Lochmaddy. And when Angus John was brought in, they stood there and sort of looked all round, wandered looking, looked all round, and he had a local lawyer now. He was Morrison. He was a brother of the Speaker of the House of Commons. This Morrison, very clever, liked his dram, very good. And he was accused of having robbed this, and his lawyer never said a word, and then eventually he got up and he said, isn't it a crying shame that a man can be prosecuted in a language he doesn't know one word of? This was English. And Angus John got off. Being prosecuted in a language says English was better than mine.
And what happened after that?
Oh, of course it was finished then. There was a salvage company came to salvage it, to mend the hole in it. And the salvage engineer lived in the hotel, and nothing would do would go out to the ship. So out we went, a salvage engineer and myself. And my God, when we got there, the tide was out. And there was a 40-foot rope ladder, going up like this. Well, I was full of beans, and up I went. And to my surprise, the deck was slimy with black oil. And there were excisemen standing there and labourers, and they were shoveling these half bottles into a great big flat scoop thing, which was lowered over the side into lighters. The lighters, I understand, were towed away down to Ayrshire, and the whiskey went to Johnny Walker's distillery in Kilmarnock, where it was redistilled. Now that's that. After I'd been shown round the deck, the captain said, "Come on, I'm getting dry. Come on up." And he had taken possession of the captain's cabin, you see.
This is who? This is
not
not
the captain, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
the salvage engineer, I'm sorry. A very fine fellow he was. And he opened a cupboard and produced a bottle and said, "See what you think of this." And of course there was no water on board the ship. We had to drink this darn stuff neat, you know. So you may know what it was like. And of course I sampled it. It was very good. And we started to find out which was the best blend, until I realized that if I didn't do something quick, I would never get over the rail and down this 40-foot ladder, you know. So I said, well, I better go. I think I've had enough. I'd sampled about 8 bottles with this now, you know, nips out of each. And he said, "Oh, you can't go without taking something with you." And of course I said, "How on earth can I take something with me with all these excisemen about?" He says, "You +4s on." I had +4s on a jersey like this. And they said, "Put them down your +4s." So I put a bottle down the inside of my right leg and the outside of my right leg, and the inside of my left leg and the outside of my left leg, and everything was fine until I started to go over the rail. And of course, as I went over the rail, these bottles stuck out at right angles, you know. And then, of course, as soon as I got over the rail, back they came, and they clink, clink, clink the whole way down that 40-foot ladder. However, it was well worth it.
And did nobody stop you?
Oh, no. The excisemen knew what was going
They
on.
just let you clank on down.
All they did was grin. They knew perfectly well what I'd come for. That was very nice of them.
There was an awful lot of shutting of eyes by the excise men. Were they taking home some whiskey themselves?
Oh,
On the
I
sly?
wouldn't know now. I wouldn't like to say that about them.
Mr. McMillan, what were some of the funny things that happened to you during the time of the politician?
Well, it was funny all the time, because it was visiting you all the time. You know, you had plenty stuff to go around.
I should say this. It's the finest whiskey I've ever tasted as a Scotchman. You didn't get drunk. You didn't get drunk at all. You just quietly fell asleep, just like this. And in 2 hours, you would wake up, pardon me, perfectly refreshed.
Did everybody get tight?
Everybody was happy, but I don't think we slept for, I would say, at least 8 weeks. We were always on the move. It was no use going to bed because somebody hammered at your door. He would either be coming with 3 or 4 bottles of whiskey, or he'd be wanting 3 or 4 bottles himself, because we had it all over the place, buried on the croft, on the loft, and everything.
Did the people of the area become connoisseurs of whiskey after this episode?
Oh, no, they're so used to it in any case. You see, they're nice whiskey drinkers, and they take it well, and you never see anybody drunk here.
Why's that?
Just because they're matured, and they're sensible people.
But what happened to the ship itself?
So they brought engineers along and they cut her. They cut the engine compartment off her and took that away.
Something I'd like to know, did the women approve of all this drinking with their husbands and their men?
The women approved of it. That it's something to do with the Scots. I don't know what it is, but They approved of it all right. They take a wee dram themselves, you know.
Did you get to ever have a nip of this wonderful whiskey?
Well, I believe my husband took home a bottle. He was given one as a present. He was away during the Second World War, and somebody, kind person, gave him a bottle of whiskey, and I was made to taste it, and I don't think I could know it from any other whiskey.
Now, what did the church think of all this?
What could they do about it? The church couldn't do anything about it, except advise. And advice doesn't go very far nowadays.
When you were talking about the whiskey being the best whiskey you've ever tasted, do you not think it was just because it was forbidden fruit?
Oh, no, it really wasn't. It tasted very good. It was like cream going down, you know, with a beautiful glow. You get some whiskey nowadays that would shudder you going down. Really would.
And so this will always stand out in your memory then?
Oh, yes. I wish I had a few bottles of it now in my old age.
Did you like the old days better?
No. They're gone bad old days.
We've since had skinned Islanders here who've gone down and brought up bottles of whiskey. The corks have given way, some have fuel oil in, and most of them have salt water, which is a great pity. It was a crying shame that beautiful whiskey should be ruined like that.
So if a bottle were to come ashore,
It would kill you. It would kill you. One or two crofters died by drinking, going out at low tide and getting this whiskey off the politician.
Would you drink any of it if you were to come across some now?
Just for old time's sake, I think I'd drink it even if it would kill me with all the pleasure it gave me while I had enough of it.
Have you ever seen any of the whiskey in the last few years?
Only 2 years ago, I got 2 glasses of whiskey on one of the islands, of the politician whiskey.
How did you know it was politician whiskey?
Anybody would know it. It was so good. Different to any other whiskey I ever tasted.
Why is that, you think?
Just because it was specially made for you Americans. It was a godsend to all people who took these whiskey and brandy in moderation.
Did the islanders not feel guilty about taking this whiskey?
No, I'm very... I'm sorry to say they don't feel guilty at all about that. Whiskey, free whiskey is something that God gave them, That's the fact.
Mr. Wilson, do people still talk about the politician with a great deal of fondness?
Oh, no, very seldom, but sometimes, in the bar, you meet an old colleague. But the younger generation don't know anything about it.
How did you feel about the people that were hauled into court, the 6 of them who were convicted?
They were better off than we were. They had a good routine in prison anyway, but we nearly went mad for that time. You couldn't sleep, you couldn't do anything. You were just on the bottle all the time.
So you think it was a good rest cure for them going to prison?
Yes.
Did you feel it was justified? Did they deserve
No,
it?
I was very, very, very sorry about it. It was a sad thing.
So what did you do? Did you save them some liquor for when they came out?
Oh, yes. Stacks of it.
Did the police know about you?
An old man was with us, and we've got about 24 cases that day, and we've seen a boat on the not very far from us, and 2 boats, and somebody said, oh, that must be the custom and excise officer and the police. And the old man said, oh, well, this is shallow water and he'll never get in here. We're all right where we are. We don't need to put the cases overboard or anything. We're all right where you are. So we took the old man's advice. But, my God, that flat bottom boat they had to go over in Eivsky got over to us and just come alongside. The custom and excise officer and the police was there. So it was that.
Did you spend some time in jail then?
Yes. 1 month, yes.
Were you one of those 6 men that were convicted?
Yes, I was, yes.
Did you feel that a great injustice had been done to you?
Oh, well, yes, because we didn't think it was a crime of any kind at that time.
Your pal over here said it was probably the best thing that ever happened to people because you got a good rest out of it and sobered up. Did you feel that way?
The only thing I regret was that there was no whiskey left when I got home.
CBC Tuesday Night has presented Tight Little Island Revisited. Conversations between Sheila Shotton and some of the islanders who recalled the happiest shipwreck in history. The program was prepared by Hector McFadgen.
Snerani ki kalava iso hoki masko faraike Doshat klattig karab Roen hortijk Hin skarinje Talla chale asetje